stand up. I noticed when I start.
As you all know, Building 77 is a 1 million square foot former warehousing building at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It's undergoing a $185 million transformation to create a home for modern manufacturing businesses and also to create a 60,000 square foot food and beverage manufacturing facility on the ground floor of the building. This is going to be transformational project for the Navy Yard. Is going to create another access point to the Navy Yard for the general public. Right now we're a secure perimeter industrial park. So this project will really bring a lot of the public to the Navy Yard, and one of our exciting partners for this project is Brooklyn Brewery. So we are here to present our plans, Brooklyn Brewery's plans for a rooftop beer garden and restaurant, a ground floor. Another part of the project is the ground floor brewing facility. They'll also be bringing their headquarters to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. This project will bring 124 jobs to the Navy Yard with the goal of 100 additional jobs long term. So here we have Eric Ottaway, CEO of Brooklyn Brewery, to present the project, as well as David Kirchner and Chris Grabe from Davis Brewery Barn.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to be very brief because I really want to let them spend most of the time in the presentation. But thank you for hosting us here. We're very excited to present this to you. As you may know, we moved to Williamsburg in 1996, and we're part of the transformation of what that neighborhood has now become today. Unfortunately, we've been so successful that we're essentially pressed out of our own neighborhood. And this project is an effort for us to find a new long-term home in Brooklyn. And we hope that this project will be able to serve similarly as an anchor project to really help revitalize this whole section of Brooklyn. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Thanks, Eric. And thanks to the Commission for the opportunity to present today. Great. The Navy Yard is a modern industrial park with over 4 million square feet of space on about 300 acres, bounded by Navy, Kent, Flushing Avenues, and bordered by the Williamsburg, Fort Greene, and downtown Brooklyn neighborhoods. It's experiencing its largest expansion since World War II with the addition of nearly 3 million square feet. A large percentage of that is attributable to the renovation of Building 77, which is the site of our Brooklyn Brewery project. As is the case with many Navy Yard buildings, Building 77 is big compared to the surrounding neighborhood. You can see it's almost as wide as the city blocks across Flushing and 2/3 as long. At 16 stories, it's the tallest on the yard. So our site is here, Building 77. Right in the middle of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, some of the city blocks and smaller scale row homes across the street. The Brooklyn Brewery project is about 75,000 square feet and includes spaces inside the existing building for beer production and new offices. Also planned is a new addition on the north side of the roof of Building 77, which will be a beer garden and restaurant with an outdoor terrace facing Manhattan. Our addition can be seen in the top diagram and outlined in orange here. Again, Building 77, 16 stories tall. We're a 2-story addition on the north side. North is up in this diagram, Manhattan and bridge views that way, and the rooftop addition again on the north side. As architects and designers, we look at the context we're working in for the project. We're both inspired by the industrial architecture of the Navy Yard and want to be mindful of its history and the site today. The 200+ years the Navy Yard has left us with great diversity of buildings, landscapes, riverfronts, docks, and machines in the service of boats. Building 77 fronts Flushing Avenue, which has a distinct group of buildings that define the street's edge along this stretch of the avenue. Steiner Studios is the building on the top right today. The bottom photo was taken last month at 77, where modifications are underway to make it suitable for businesses. 9 floors have been opened up, which were formerly wall exterior. The building has all new windows and modernized services. Building 77 is notable for the speed and sophistication of its construction on the eve of World War II. Moving to the west along Flushing Avenue is is Building 3 next to 77. You really sense the definition of an urban street wall here, punctuated by a view corridor between the buildings towards the river. The bottom photo exhibits one of the great moments in the Navy Yard, and one of the things that makes New York great for that matter. Here we see buildings from 3 centuries still intact, all in use and repurposed, and all in a dialogue about the Navy Yard's history and the future of industry in Brooklyn. Finally, on Flushing Avenue, one of the newer Navy Yard buildings at the top. It's an addition to Building 92, and it serves as the BNYDC's employment center, offices, classrooms, event meeting spaces, and houses the BNY history exhibit. Here we see the juxtaposition of a distinctly modern addition in the setting of historical industrial architecture. Those were some examples of our immediate neighbors along Flushing Avenue, so let's zoom out a little bit and see other examples of the rich context we're working in the Navy Yard. We've referred to these images before as the context of the sky at the Navy Yard. From within the yard, or as you approach it in the ferry, the skyline is often defined not by rectilinear industrial buildings, but by taller elements like these great radio towers, tank towers, marine cranes, with their open truss structures and shed box control rooms. As business and visitorship at the Navy Yard grow and as transportation in the vicinity becomes more robust, images like these are becoming a more familiar piece of the Brooklyn and New York City story. Another example from high up in the Navy Yard is the steel trussed rooftop gantry on top of Building 280, a brick masonry building. And we want to get one shot of 77 here. The brewery addition is slated on the north side there, and a remnant refurbished radio tower is going to exist on the Brooklyn site right there. For another piece of the Navy Yard story, look down, not up, to the horizontal ground plane. Much of the yard was designed for the service or construction of ships, and some of it still operates that way today in the case of certain dry docks. But the new cemetery landscape project at the southeast end of the yard shows the potential for repurposing not only buildings in the Navy Yard, but the ground plane as well for public access to landscape. Okay, on to our building. This is the Building 77 site. Flushing Avenue is to the south. So for the plans now, south is going to be right, and north is going to be to the left. Flushing Avenue is to the south, and there are internal roads on 3 sides. A new front yard and public entrance is being added along Flushing Avenue. So this is gated today. There's an internal yard today. This is all being opened up, so you can walk from the sidewalk of Flushing into the first floor of Building 77. Other features of the building include loading docks on the east and west sides of the building for use by the Brooklyn Brewery and other tenants. There's a freight elevator at 4 corners, which are being upgraded for industrial tenants. And the center structure is an existing penthouse. The remaining north and south roofs are flat. The south side will be retained for BNY Mechanicals, and the brewery is occupying the north side with their new addition. So that's existing, and this is proposed. Again, this is a bird's eye looking down, so we're seeing the roof all the way to the ground. Everything in the new roof is gray. The footprint of the new addition is nominally 100 feet by 100 feet, or a gross footprint of about 10,000 square feet. Up on the roof, there are also 3 modifications to existing stairs to make the roof compliant for exiting under the building code. Along the north side at the ground level, the brewery is adding tanks for incoming and spent grain and other equipment to support brewing production. Next, we're going to look at some individual Brooklyn Brewery floors. This is the first floor existing. Just point out that if it's not Brooklyn Brewery, it's not shown in the plan, so it's looking a little bare. That was just advised. Some of the other projects are under review as well, so we didn't want to put conflicting information out. The Brooklyn Brewery is taking the northwest corner, as we see here. It houses the brewery's production facility. The public food hall with producers and vendors extends all the way from the east side, from the south to the north. Again, public access is there. This shows in gray about 16 square feet interior footprint for brewing, which includes the main brew house, fermentation tanks, bottling and canning lines, and loading and storage facility. There's also a public component to this plan for the Brooklyn Brewery that includes a small retail shop and tasting area located adjacent to the building's main hall. From there, visitors can continue up on a stair or one of the building elevators to an elevated 3,000 square foot mezzanine that runs north-south all along this space, and it's part of the tour and overlooks the production facility. So this is all public hall on this side. This is Russ & Dollars, another industrial tenant, so two main industrial tenants on the first floor. The public can enter here. Navy Yard staff or personnel can enter here, and production and food can be accessed here. The public component to the Brooklyn Brewery is here, small shop and tasting room. This is all production, and this is the brewing facility. So like the shining kettle is the real showpiece along that main hall. So this is a view from that public hall looking into the production facility with the brew house tanks on the right and a new retail shop and tasting room on the left. Building 77 offers the opportunity for the Brooklyn Brewery project to showcase design that acknowledges the principles of the Brooklyn Navy Yard industrial legacy, but at the same time is distinct and represents the future of making and entrepreneurialism in a post-industrial context. Nowhere is this more on display than the Brooklyn Brewery's new production facility, where the existing first floor is defined by tall spaces, original concrete mushroom capital columns, and historic warehousing remnants. Beers made here will be the visitor's first impression when they arrive to see new stainless steel brewing kettles and production equipment positioned immediately behind a new 20-foot-high glass wall. The lightness and transparency of these elements provides contrast to Building 77's structure, but at the same time feel at home in their repurposed industrial setting. So we're going to head up to the 16th floor. This is an existing 16th floor plan. It was built as a radio room for monitoring the New York Harbor during World War II. Again, that's the center structure here. We have the radio tower still intact along the north side. Views from the roof are stunning, particularly on the north side, where a panorama of downtown Brooklyn, the East River bridges in Lower Manhattan make it hard to imagine how it sat there underdeveloped for so long. In order to turn the north roof into the future Brooklyn Brewery beer garden, restaurant, and terrace, a considerable amount of make-ready work is required. We'll be structurally reinforcing all 18,000 square feet on the north side. And once it's done, we can build this. Shown in gray is approximately 10,000 square foot new addition. On the north side, it houses the new beer hall and restaurant with main communal seating areas located on the west and north sides to capture prime views, and a full kitchen is located in the block of space to the east and is currently under planning by the design team. We're imagining large folding doors all along the north that can remain open in fair weather months for seating that extends out under an awning roof and feels more connected to the outdoors. The terrace extends all along the north edge and has three main components. Hardscape areas have seating in different configurations that are intended for eating and drinking and leisure. A self-serve walk-up kitchen window with views into an open kitchen exhibits the new facilities, food and beer connection, and lastly, half of the terrace is landscaped green space. The brewery is investigating options with the Brooklyn Grange for vegetative landscaping, where urban rooftop gardening could support the food program. That effort is in the planning process. These are generally blocks of space showing hardscaping versus the stipple and green, which is area available for urban gardening. Looking at solar orientation, what will actually be planted up there is all the next step. So this plan can and will change. And then the final plan we look at shows a partial level up above the main beer hall. The main beer hall is open to below. It's a double height space. It can be overlooked from the mezzanine. There's a feature stair that connects the main level to the mezzanine, and we have a one-stop elevator for ADA access. We have a second smaller porch up above, so it's doubly great for people watching and catching the view. And the programming for this mezzanine is an event space and demonstration kitchen. We hope this rendering speaks for itself, and everybody is thinking, I'd love to have a beer there. One feature of the terrace is that it will be accessible to Brooklyn Navy Yard staff with no requirement to buy food or drink. So looking at the elevations of our new structure, this is before and after north elevation, shown on the left as before, and then with the brewery addition on the right. This elevation can be seen from the Navy Yard, the East River, and from Manhattan. You don't see this from Flushing Avenue or the land side. This existing building 77 appears massive with its concrete construction and distinct function driven by symmetrical form. For the brewery addition, building 77 serves as a substantial base for a lighter, more open, and expressive new rooftop addition. The exterior will be glassy and light, maximizing Lower Manhattan and East River Bridge views from the beer garden, while giving visibility to the interior structure from the outside looking in, especially at night. This is a distinctly modern addition with its expression of horizontal roof planes in contrast to the walled concrete masonry building it's perched on. This is where I want to revisit the idea introduced earlier of context of the Navy Yard sky. The new Brooklyn Brewery Beer Hall now lives high on top of the Navy Yard with water towers, marine cranes, radio antennas, and rooftop gantries, all contributing to the distinctive skyline along the upper edges of the Navy Yard's industrial building stock. This is the south elevation along Flushing Avenue. So from the land side, looking north, we don't anticipate seeing much at all. Our high roof pops up a little bit above the existing low penthouses here. And there's a new residential tower called Navy Green that you may see a glimpse of the roof from the south side there. This is the existing east elevation. Its distinct form is attributable to 4 freight elevators at each of the corners, which terminate at the towers to the far left and far right. The 12th center penthouse is the former radio room. Building 77 has mechanical equipment planned for the south roofs and for some of the elevator overruns and existing penthouse roofs shown either here. The brewery addition is at no point taller than the existing 77 upper penthouse roofs. We're using one of the lower elevator roofs here to structure the lower roof plane. The new wall material is glass. This is intended to give a lightness to the new structure. This is a virtual mirror to the east side. This is the west elevation existing. The brewery's production facility is along the first floor on this side, and we'll use the existing dock down here. The brewery's new exterior brewing tanks and equipment are to the left alongside the loading dock, and the rooftop addition, sloped roof, is all in plane here, so you'll really see that profile from that side, and it's tilted back to gain a greater aperture with views to Manhattan, and tilting it southerly can also be used to capture solar energy through the photovoltaic panels. We're working with the zoning attorney for the rooftop addition. The goal we're working towards is to determine as-of-right status for the penthouse addition in the M31 manufacturing zone. The addition is shown in orange, and neither it nor Building 77 penetrates the sky plane in the M31. So our list of precedents for this project is probably in the hundreds by now. There's no perfect comparable for what we're proposing. Rather, here are a few moments from different projects we're currently thinking about. Counterclockwise from the top right is Surly Brewing in Minneapolis. It's a distinctly modern building in an industrial context. An existing concrete silo building on the left of this image creates a partially enclosed landscape garden for the brewery. Next, the Brooklyn Grange is our next door neighbor, and we're really excited about the possible symbiosis with urban farming and our food menu. 280 at the Yard shows the integration of the steel truss rooftop structure with the masonry industrial building. 4 and 5 are 2 structures in Texas, and we think they're successful for their articulation of structure and the way the other building elements follow the structure's organizational principles. And then New Belgium in Asheville, a new brewery with its terrace and adjacent canopy operable facade. For materials, at this stage, these are more material principles than a finalized palette for the project. Some examples are steel and wood hybrid roof structures with exposed wood deck to add warmth to the space. To the right is an example of a roof skylight with integrated photovoltaics and a translucent panel, where examples of sustainable design can be part of the experience and an important piece of the material expression of the project. We talked about large glass folding doors, and the example in the bottom right shows how they can swing open and extend an indoor-outdoor social space. And for a roof terrace, we're looking at wood deck, stone pavers, and of course, landscaping that may include vegetative examples. There's an example of hand-painted mural, which the brewery has in Williamsburg now, and we look to use on the brewery floors as a recurring interior element. Some renderings. This is from the west side of 77, from Flushing Avenue, looking up. There's a small outside corner here, and that's one of the modifications to our staircase, which is just to say you won't see much from the street from this side at all. From the east side, looking back again, you see the horizontal roof planes. I think the rendering starts to show how the glass can you really get a sense of the structure beyond. And this is really where you'll see Brooklyn Brewery. This is on the approach from the East River Ferry today. The beer hall is the high portion, so that pops up. That's the high celebrated space, and then the lower portion is the kitchen mezzanine. And some pictures of our working model back in the office. Everything in white is new, everything in gray is existing, building 77. So this is the full terrace along the north side, the beer hall with the folding doors that open up onto that terrace, the mezzanine porch and kitchen with the service window there. Some of our new equipment we've pushed back to a low flat roof, as well as some of the exhaust from the kitchen is positioned on our flat roof. And the white shows some of the modifications to the existing stairs. View from the west side. And I'll just end, the Brooklyn Brewery beer garden structure is complementary to the industrial architecture of the Navy Yard, and at the same time offers contrast to Building 77 through its materiality and lightness. The new main hall has long spans, high spaces, large openings, and employs an expressive structural concept with open trusses, mindful of industrial architecture and the art of construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, this is a great project. You've been presenting this almost as if we were the Landmarks Commission. I think that, we've seen many projects over the years from the Navy Yard, and in fact, you're correct, we have looked at another part of Building 77 and that front entrance. So thank you for keeping those projects separate. I think this is a wonderful project, and what you're trying to do, both in terms of, we don't have any jurisdiction of the interior of the building, but explaining how you'll sort of bring the life of the brewery into the massiveness of that interior space. I think it would be very dynamic. But I guess I said one. I know this is just conceptual, and we've got things still to work out. But in one rendering, I think where you showed, you said we hope that this will make you want to have beer here. I was thinking about the height of the parapet relative to, and the solidity of the parapet relative to your, we know it has to be 42 inches around it. If you really want to plant other than thyme or herbs, you're going to need some depth for soil. And it seems like you're proposing a deck, which would be great, because then you'll have the additional depth for the plant material. But I think, is that parapet a given? Is it an existing masonry?
You're absolutely right. We're raising the deck, we're gaining 24 inches.
Oh, perfect.
With with our reinforcing. So that gives us the depth. The existing parapet is concrete masonry, and it's already only 36 inches today. It's from an older code. So given that we're raising the floor, our whole parapet will be new or extended high. One of the thoughts is it could even be higher around some of the seating areas, which is where people will be drinking. That's to say, you could have a handrail or something like that with a ledge, so you could walk up to it and sit your beer down without, something going over. But that will be an entirely new element on all three sides.
I think, Signe, what's interesting about the opportunity over here is, as Newt said, we're building approximately a 2-foot-high platform above the existing roof with slopes. We have to have access to that existing roof for placement of membranes and looking at the roof drains and everything. So it gives us an extra 2 feet over here where we could actually sink in certain pallets a little bit and then raise them a little bit too. Like we sit on some of them 18 inches high or whatever. I think the goal that we all want is we want to have everybody to have the opportunity to walk around the edge and look at all the different views, and maybe more people are on this side, fewer people on this side. Working with Brooklyn Grange, we're going to try to do a series of beds of planters for different things, which we're going to recommend. Some may be coming inside in the winter, some may not. We want to do a little bit of a shade trellis potentially too, somehow. There will be a whole other development to the outside, but we're going to have to figure out a way to be able to remove pallets of things. So it'll all be done on a module. It can be removable, but we can get an extra depth to really grow some substantial things, not with excessive weight, but still looking at the right product to make sure we can grow some things. And as far as the parapet goes, it's a study that we still have to get into, but we want to, we may potentially have a little wind protection that we want to investigate as well too. So there are things, and the existing parapet is just going to have to be dealt with. How, I don't know, maybe we will have some bar seats against a lower shelf overlooking it somehow. So there's ways to go in that whole outside experience.
I think that was similar to my only concern, not concern, but just the exposure to the elements and being sure that the materials and details are sturdy enough so that in a few years it doesn't look crappy. And no, and just in general, I mean, I think in a project like this, which I think is fantastic, I just think that the details are really, the handrail or the...
Well, that's what we're very much into, the authenticity of all the joints of all the steel trusses, how they're bolted, how they're smaller angles, as lightweight as we can make them, and kind of really use that. Like you mentioned, the structure is certainly the influence on the rest of the design, so we're working with Arab now on long spans on how to deal with this. The reason we have long spans is not just the opportunity for the volume for the space, is that we can only reinforce a couple of columns down below. Our goal is to reinforce these 3 columns down, because believe it or not, the mushroom capitals you see on the lower levels, they don't extend all the way up to the top. And our roof is only 40 pounds per square feet, where we need 100 pounds. So we're building this sort of raised floor over everything, suspending it on top of the columns, but this roof has to be, it has to hit a few columns that we're going to reinforce down a few levels. So there's a lot of other influence, but structure is definitely what we're after, to turn it into something that's really lightweight and cool and well lit. And the details are what we live for too. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that besides Brooklyn Grange, we're looking at a lot of the people in the Navy Yard to maybe help make some lighting, to maybe help make some furniture that we would design for them. For example, the New York decks now, we've talked to them about the kind of materials that we would put outside, make sure they're long lasting. So we want to try to keep this very local and try to use all of that, have a nice narrative about being part of Brooklyn, being part of the Navy Yard, which is what these gentlemen have been about since their origin. It's all about the community. It's all about giving back to the community. So,
Just out of interest, is ice stone still made in the Navy Yard?
Yes.
yes,
That is fabulous.
yes, yes. That's certainly someone that we will be discussing with us. Absolutely.
If we can afford them, that is.
Right.
I know.
Well, I have to say, it does, I was sitting here thinking, I'm so glad it's not an apartment building. You know, that only a few people have access to. I mean, I think it's great that it's a business and that it's a public.
What a great view, and you won't
Yeah.
bother anybody, and it's really well thought out.
And it's four
Thank you.
seasons, I mean, the way you
Yes,
designed it.
absolutely.
And it can be four
Absolutely.
seasons, though it's on
Yeah.
the roof.
No, we'll end up doing some sort of decorative lighting or something during winter season, so what you will see will still be a focal point outside of winter wonderland, if you will, or whatever. We don't know yet. So,
And we know from experience with our neighbors around Williamsburg, like the White Hotel, that even in the middle of winter, people will still go outside to admire the view and, not sit out there for hours, obviously, but they'll go out for 5 or 10 minutes and take a few pictures and come back in and warm back up. So it'll get used even in the winter outside.
So it's so hot here.
I have a question about one side, I think it was the south elevation, where it's a building in the yard on the top, I guess on the south.
Flushing Avenue down at the lower level, that is sort of not our purview. That's something that's already been presented, I think, via Marvel Architects.
Yes.
That we approved that.
Yeah.
Right, so we just showed it, how we're not influencing that particular side at all. Of course, we would like a big B someplace, but that's another story.
And also, just so you know, Manuel, the Navy Yard is, they're working on an overall Navy Yard signage, like identification package, and specific signage for this building, so we're expecting that in October.
So thank you, onward.
Great.
Thank you very much. Very much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Good morning to all. My name is David Salzman from the USDA, and last time I had an opportunity to show the project to you, Outbuilding 22, that we affectionately call it. There were some questions about the roof, and I thought it would be better if I brought the lead architect on this room into the room who was stuck on the runway last time, some of you might remember. So I'll turn it over to John.
These are the metal samples for this. It does review, but I know you've all seen this previously, so I'll run through some of this a little quickly, and then please stop me if you have any questions. The Building 22 project is one of the last pieces of the master plan that's to be completed. It's the triangular building here, where the current Nike Pavilion is. So it's the sister building to the Heineken building, which was done a few years ago. And it's really designed as kind of a folly-like structure that flanks the main public space for the US Open. So this is the site for the project. You can see that the square building here is the Nike Retail Pavilion, and the building looks like this. It was done with the campus 20 years ago. It's a fairly simple building with an asphalt roof that's 20 years old, and it's part of the improvements that we've been replacing as part of the master plan. So the project itself is triangular in plan, and there are two primary facades. So there's the facade that faces Ash here, and then there's a facade that faces the food court, and then the southern facade, which faces some of the tournament courts, is really the service facade. So we've got two glass facades on the building, and the building is designed so that there are two layers of So here's the Nike footprint. Here's our new floor plan. As you all know, this is a display area for Mercedes-Benz. Currently, they're in Armstrong Stadium. Part of removing Armstrong requires us to replace that display space for Mercedes, which is one of the primary sponsors of this opening. The upper floor is very similar to Heineken. The large open area looks out to Ash. It looks over to the food court, and there's a central bar with service space behind it. This is the elevation that was presented back in August. We've got both sets of elevations, current and previous, so that you can compare the two in response to some of the comments that he has. So this is the new elevation. We've tried to simplify the folding of this roof form as it comes down off of the roof and folds onto the wall surface on the southern facade. And this is the facade that faces food court. So you can see here we have the glass storefront similar to what we have at Heineken, which is facing the food court. We've got spandrel glass here on the rest of that ground floor facade. And then we have 2 layers of metal panel, which conceptually these 2 layers are folding over one another, and there's some space between the way they fold that creates some interest architecturally. This is the facade that faces Ash. All of these glass panels here fold up similar to those on the new retail buildings that are nearby, and we're doing that with this hangar door. This will have glass on the hangar door, and that'll allow this to be wide open during the event, so that there will be 3 or 4 cars that will be parked in this space for the open. We've got a series of sections that were cut through the building so that you can see how the roof structure tapers back. The paving materials are largely the same as what's there currently, and we're matching those. And then these are the building materials. Again, consistent with the building materials that we've been implementing since the master plan vision in 2010. The materials are consistent, so we have the same storefront glazing as what was used on Heineken, metal panel, again, which is consistent with some of these other secondary structures. This is the hangar door structure, and then the spandrel glass. These are both, this photo here and this photo here are from Heineken, which is on the other side of the plaza. These are the material colors. So we have a platinum mica, which is that sample there, and then this sort of charcoal color as the secondary accent color. This is Heineken, so this is the partner building on the other side of the plaza, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So the buildings are very similar in terms of the way that we've thought about them in slightly different shapes. We are maintaining the consistency with all of the fonts that are part of the USTA brand book, which means that for the most part, all of the signage on the building will be Helvetica. Mercedes-Benz, obviously, part of this brand is a very identifiable font, so there will be some signage on the glass which will identify Mercedes in some way. That's still being worked through. We don't have the exact signage sort of yet. And then you had requested examples, I believe, of how these variations of Helvetica have been implemented on campus in the last couple of years. So this is Grandstand Stadium, which just opened this year for the Open. This is a condensed version of Helvetica, which was used on some of the retail that also just opened this year. This is the signage for the USTA ticket office, which we presented to you a couple of months ago. And then this is the building signage here and the secondary signage for Armstrong Stadium, which is about to begin construction. And Again, there's a series of renderings that show before and after the changes that were requested. So this was the previous roof shape. This is the modified roof shape, which tried to address some of the comments about simplification and just making it a little more straightforward. Previous generation rendering. This is the modified version. I think one of the issues with this rendering, which was a little, it wasn't really showing it very clearly, and I think that was really a function of the rendering, was that this is actually a fairly subtle fold, and you can see there's just a jam extension here. This rendering, we adjusted the lighting so that it was a little easier to read. You can see the hangar doors retracted during normal operations so that you can walk freely through the structure. Here's a rendering of that front facade. Again, there'll be some kind of sponsor activation within the space, which is going to be part of the tenant fit out, but would be changing on an annual basis. It wouldn't necessarily be a white wall. And then there will be a series of cars that will be in this space, and then this would be another cafe space. And here's a rendering of this intersection point between the promenade and the food court. So this is the sort of primary view of the stadium, or not stadium, I'm sorry, but this retail building. And that's the last image I have, but we're happy to answer whatever questions.
Thank you. Is there anything else anyone wants to say from USDA side?
Not at this moment.
So I think you've been very responsive to a lot of our comments. I raised at the last meeting, I guess, a concern about whether you're going to have to protect the underside of those stairs from somebody, because I don't think it's sort of an awkward height and reality.
What we'll do is we'll have a simple bar railing which keeps people from being able to walk into that space and knock their head. And we've done that in other points on the campus where it'll just be a simple bar which will be finished in the same metal finish as the stair, which will keep someone from knocking their head. But absolutely, otherwise I wouldn't do that. It's not shown in the rendering.
Right, no, understood. So are people comfortable with the changes that have been made? So this is not on for a vote today, but based on the nodding of heads, it would seem that this is ready for approval. However, it's come to our attention that the Chase sign has been installed on 2 facades of Arthur Ashe, excuse me. We, if I recall, explicitly gave approval for one side. And I will say that we will not approve this project, we will not pass this project until that offending sign is removed.
So, I'll keep John out of this, to be fair to John. Both signs were put up at the same time just before they open. The second sign is a temporary sign that comes down next week.
And is that something you're going to do every year?
Absolutely. It was never intended to be permanent, and it would have actually been done last week, except for the fact, not anyone on the commission's fault, but the same people who put up and down the sign had to work the event. They're from out of town. We had to give them a week off. They had been here for like a year straight. So it's coming down next week. And under any other year, it would come down literally the day after the event.
But
that's the
you're
south side.
saying that we gave approval for that Chase sign
No,
to be there during the event?
no, I'm not saying that at all. The PDCs was responsible for the permanent installation, which is the sign on the north side. Our lease allows us to temporarily install a sign on the south side.
I'm sure that's the case.
It's in our lease.
We don't have jurisdiction over the lease. I would have to refer to the Parks Department on that, but in any case, this will ask for that lease.
It was never intended to be permanently installed on both sides.
So when it's removed and you provide a photograph, we will put this on the agenda for approval.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Oh, good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Dan Slipman. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs at the American Museum of Natural History. I'm joined by my colleagues, Joe James, Landscape Architect from Reed Hildebrand, and Gordon Davis from Dental. I'm pleased that my colleagues from Cultural Affairs and Parks are also here. The project that we're here to discuss with you today is our proposed relocation of the Santiago Calatrava Times Capsule, which is situated within Theodore Roosevelt Park. The Times Capsule was installed in 2000 to celebrate the millennium. As you may know, the museum is currently in process with numerous city agencies for a proposed building on the west side of the campus for the Richard Gilder Center for Science Education and Innovation. The site that we're talking about today is located right within Theodore Roosevelt Park at 79th and Columbus. As part of the project, we are looking to take down, just trying to see if Appalachian can do it. We are looking to take down 3 existing buildings, the Weston Pavilion, which is the glass cube, which is situated right next to the entry, Building 15 and Building 15A. Both these buildings house our ichthyology department. The fishes, over 2 million specimens of fishes will be relocated as part of this project. With the proposed relocation, we are looking to move the Calatrava over to the north side of the campus, over by the Rose Center, which Joe James, the landscape architect, will take you through. We have been working with the Parks Department and the Department of Cultural Affairs as we've gone through this project, and we are hopeful to have a good dialogue with you today on this proposed relocation. I can show you closer in. This is the current site, as it is at 79th Columbus. The Calatrava Times Capsule is situated right here with the museum entrance right here. The terrace was created to house the Times Capsule, and the material is different from the existing pathways through Theodore Roosevelt Park. This is the current site of the museum. Columbus Avenue to the bottom of the screen, Central Park West to the top, 77th and 81st Street. I apologize. I am a Mets fan, I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't destroy any of us. And then this is the Gilder Center situated within the museum's complex and within the park. The museum's new building looks to come into Theodore Roosevelt Park by roughly 1/4 of an acre. We have shifted the building further eastward into the complex by removing 3 of those existing buildings to lessen the impact on Theodore Roosevelt Park. The museum has been in communication with Mr. Calatrava, who is very interested in the new building and in the new design, and is looking forward to seeing the new design images as time permits. So Joe is going to take you through where we are as far as the proposed relocation.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks. A few key considerations we had with relocating of the Calatrava Times Capsule. One, it's context, and it's also its setting. So in terms of context, the Times Capsule is a contemporary of both the Weston Pavilion and the Rose Center, in both time frame and architecture, somewhat. The design of the Calatrava Times Capsule comprises the basic forms of line, circle, and square, similar to the glass cube it sits next to. Although its curving sinuous form is different from it, it is absolutely symmetrical in all of its forms, both directions. It's kind of a counterpoint to the symmetry and the Weston Pavilion. Also, its setting, in its existing condition, the Times Capsule sits in a rectangular terrace that is orthogonal both to the architecture, and the Times Capsule sits orthogonally within it. The terrace is surrounded by a series of plantings and is, as Dan mentioned, adjacent one of the major entrances, or one of the entrances to the museum for prominence. The terrace itself is of sufficient size to sit, to have gatherings, for people to gather around the Times Capsule. And additionally, the existing location of the Times Capsule does not have any barriers in front of it. You can go up and touch its metal form. The proposed location is an extension of the Rose entrance at the terrace, at the Rose entrance here. It is accessed by two locations, one off of the Horseshoe Loop Drive here, and an area steps down to the terrace here. It is surrounded in plantings and is completely accessible for people of all mobility. Here's an existing photo of the Times capsule in this location. Currently it has no benches or seating immediately around it. There are park benches probably 25 feet away. The material of the terrace is two types of granite, the Jetness of the Rose Center, and then also the Milford Pink granite. This is a view of the existing conditions in spring, looking towards the Rose Center. And this is the proposed conditions, nestling the Times capsule into a terrace surrounded by planting just off to the north, or sorry, the east of the existing terrace. This is a view of the existing conditions in winter, and a proposed view of what it would look like in winter. You can see a little bit more of the Gilder Center here in the background. A view from the side looking to the east in spring, the existing conditions. One thing to note, this black granite bench would be reused and relocated as part of this project. It would shift that bench further to the east, creating a terrace here, surrounding it with planting, and providing a place now for seating around the Times capsule. And then, just to familiarize you with the building, this is the image of winter of the new Gilder Center, with the continuation of the park moving in front of it, and the image in spring of the Gilder Center. That's all. Thank you.
I can answer any questions.
It's always complicated, I think, when the artist is alive and the piece is being relocated. You said that Mr. Calatrava looks forward to reviewing this further. In your mind, if he's not happy with the design, what happens next?
The indications that we got from Mr. Calatrava to date was that he was fine with a relocated area. He was more interested in the actual design of the Gilder Center than the actual relocation of the Times capsule. That being said, once we show Mr. Calatrava, we anticipate that he will be amenable to the proposed relocation. Should he not be, we will have to discuss with him and potentially come back.
Right. Well, I just want to say at the outset that I have the highest respect for Reed Hildebrand, and please extend my compliments back. And so I am sure that you have done your due diligence on alternative locations, and you've obviously been very respectful to the context in which the piece is being relocated. And I think that having a place to sit just a little bit out of the fray as you're providing here, it will be a well-used spot, and I think that the sculpture will actually be more appreciated in this context. And I also thought it's kind of interesting the form that this has with the form of the broad arch, that actually together they make quite a good composition, even though it's not obviously symmetrically placed on axis with that, which would be done. So, you know, I'm I'm supportive of this effort, and I think it will actually be an asset to this side of the museum. Others?
I frequent the space, and I think that that's a great spot for it. I mean, it just makes sense visually, and it allows for people to actually sit and view it and sort of contemplate it. In the other space, I think it was sort of hidden and kind of had to, find it on their way, just walking around the park, almost separate than the actual museum. So now it feels like it's part of it.
One of the things we did notice as we went through this process is that when we landed here, we're like, wow, it really, maybe we should have had it there in the first place. But it's been something that's been discussed within the neighborhood as well. We've had a group that we've been working with for the proposed redesign of the west side of the park, and this has come up in that conversation, and everybody that has participated within that group has been supportive of this concept.
I know it's had its challenges.
Yes.
Yes, it has.
And Parks Department, you're supportive of this?
Yep.
All right, well,
Thank you.
onward, and all the best on the next approval.
Thank you. That one. That's why I want to go do some more work. Thank you.
One-story garage was a former service station, has served other functions, as you can tell by the different cuts that have been made into the wall. We did originally like the parapet line, and there were some issues of this where we thought about institutional memory and preservation, but a lot of this cost-prohibitive measures really pushed themselves towards a new facade, and that new facade with a larger entrance, one of the biggest features here, and a new human entrance. This is the other side of the street, multifamily housing, and we have behind it the Parks and Recreation handball court and playground. Okay, so in the site, we have on the site, and we heard a lot of what you guys had said. We put in a new street tree and are more than agree with some of those street greening desires. The impetus is for more sustainable New York. This demo plan shows the kind of what I dare call cacophonous arrangement right now of program. Human on the left, ambulance on the right. The apparatus floor has 14-foot high ceilings. It's built to truck scale. On the left, you have 9-foot roughly drop ceiling with all offices, admin, lockers, bathrooms. The new plan cleans it up. So as you can see on the left, we now have lockers, both male and female, distinguished here. Same with the bathrooms. One open to the public and ADA accessible.
Training rooms in the back, health and wellness, kitchen in the front, and the lieutenant's office, which is, as you may or not know, has to be in front of the building, with eyes on the apparatus floor. The sustainable green roof, which offers organic insulation, helps with the water runoff issues in our combined storm sewer system, also has solar thermal facilities on the roof. We're going to have these solar tubes throughout, which are 21 to 29 inch diameters for passive daylighting during the day. At night, they'll be augmented with electrical daylighting, electrical lighting. These are some of the low-lying shrubs we have. The sedum comes in 4 to 6 inch trays. They come in sections. They get installed, connected, and then it's a low irrigation requirement. It is not currently designed to be an occupiable roof other than for maintenance issues and to go up there. We are and will plan for safety measures in case someone isn't there, of course. This existing elevation, the existing elevation in the photo, and if you want me to slow down, tell me, because for respect of your time, I'm trying to point out the proposed facade. So we have the human door on the left, ambulance door on the right, the new 18 foot, as opposed to 12 foot. We have, as you can tell, the railing, which was set back as requested. We appreciate this because the idea was to highlight the greenery on the front. We wanted this to be seen. We also wanted this door and this door to kind of be the lifting, accentuating, and elevating element that kind of connects it to the neighboring buildings. We have here what we have both lintels and sills with masonry detailing that's kind of not really is implemented nowadays unless it's a preservation project. We wanted some variety in irrigation, so we have this heartbeat, the kind of heartbeat of windows which avoids the flat line of emergency medical station. The height of the signs, the punched metal, the idea was a passive sign, which would require no illumination. A western facing facade, which has the sun behind it. This is the shadow, the inverse shadow that would move slowly closer to the building as the sun rises. There was discussion of backlight illumination during the night, so you could have lamps concealed behind the metal panel that would shine out to the letters, and you see the negative of the letters through the sky. The idea was a lot of the civic pride being in the station. The materials, we are choosing a cooler light brick to contrast the red steel doors. The FDNY Trueform Red is a standard. The brick, we are still in the process of selecting, but we know we do want not a dark brick because it's already silhouetted and it's at a 75 foot long. We don't want it to be impressive, but rather a positive presence in the community. The back, the rear of the facade is slightly distorted. As you can tell, there's brick crumbling. There is needing repair. We're doing it in kind. The only difference is we wanted to present a transom window, the possibility of having this on window. However, after discussions of lot line requirements, we're meeting the 10% glazing. We have to see with the Parks and Rec neighbor and Handle Court, this one-story brick belongs to the neighboring institution if this is going to be possible. So we're trying, but as far as that transom window is the only change to the back. Otherwise, the back is just in commonplace. And I'll leave it at the rendering so we can have a discussion.
Can I ask just a general question? Does the public come to any EMS station?
The public does not typically come to an EMS station, no. In fact, they're not deployed from here. They are sent out, they're dispatched to locations from which an ambulance is rapid deployed. So you don't see these ambulances exiting with sirens blaring at full speed from this garage. And the public, I mean, when I was there, if they pass, it's just in passing. It's not on top. But no, it's
not a public. I think that...
And Irma, please, by all means, correct me.
No, if you said it correctly, we don't usually have people come to the, either the firehouse or the EMS station, just in case there's someone who's sick in the vicinity and needs attention or has to use the bathroom. We do provide them with that accessible bathroom on the apparatus floor, which Esteban noted is closer to the front, regardless if it's firehouse or EMS station. But other than that, no, the public doesn't generally come to the EMS stations.
So, that's kind of what I thought. So I'm a little surprised at the prominence of the signage.
We can just...
Well, I mean, the fact that actually Station 39 is the most prominent inch soil depth?
We're still calculating the exact installation requirements to determine the soil depth. But yeah, we're working roughly with a 4-inch tray.
Right. So in a 4-inch tray, you can't support the kind of shrubs that you're showing.
On the front of the building, the front section of the building will have the treads, and it will be the only part of the green roof in order to allow higher shrubbery. So we're talking 6-inch trays in the front with a safety zone and then the railing, which was pushed back behind the shrubbery, and then the front trays.
And how are those shrubs going to survive?
All of it is the low-lying sedum and even the higher growth. If we chose wispy grasses, which we were talking about with our consultant, they are all require low irrigation and perennial. In maintenance, we will have a ladder. There will be a hatching ladder inside to access the roof so that you can, in dry spells, who knows what's going to happen to the plant, but that's why in dry spells you can go out, there'll be a hose bib available, and there will be the opportunity to manually irrigate them.
Yeah, if you have mind signing up for that project.
I definitely am. I encourage it. I'm sure you remember a few years back, I think we finished the project in 2012 or 13 for this Auriga EMS station in the Bronx, EMS 3, where it's 100% green roof. I visit the station routinely to see how everything's going, and the roof is just royal. It just, all the sedum grew in. There are, I'm not even exaggerating, no weeds to be pulled, because part of the specifications, the contractor was required to maintain the roof for the first 2 years to make sure that all the plants take, to pull up anything that grew in between until it becomes a thick mat. And at Auriga right now, we're at that thick mat phase, and it just looks beautiful.
No, I have no concern about the green roof part. I have a concern about the taller vegetation, because that will, there is no vegetation in my knowledge that will grow to the height that you're showing there that doesn't require some level of irrigation.
I mean, fair enough to say if they only reach this height exactly, they will reach the objective as a visible height, significantly higher than the low lines in the company. And we've been talking with specific green roof consultants who have told us this is possible and talked to us about plant types that are on the roof.
Okay, good. So we'll look forward to that.
I'm sorry, you go ahead. Well, excuse me. I do think that the height and the prominence of the signage detracts from the entire building. I'm not sure who you are advertising the Station 39 to. You've made the point that this is not the same as a firehouse, but that you are on coal, and there are requests for the services for EMS. It seems to me that the prominence of it, the height, and even for the visibility of the roof and the amenity of the roof from across the street and wherever, it all seems so prominent, excessive, and unnecessary. And just a couple of other things. Just a quick point, I think you said that, or someone, I beg your pardon, that when asked about serving anyone in the community, I think you said that if there was some sort of emergency or need, that someone could go into the bathroom. Did you say that?
I mean, if there's an emergency or a need, someone could approach the facility and get attention.
Okay, how would anybody know that? And from within, from the community or anybody, how would that be known?
So it seems like number one, you said advertise it too. I just wondered if there's something up. The signage, which we've been calling signage, we do consider a sculptural element. We do consider the signage above and beyond signage. It's a sculptural facade element. It does have to do with the rhythm of the buildings that are in context. It also responds to the entire vicinity. And yeah, sure, it's dry cleaners and Popeyes and McDonald's and it's loud in every corner. But why are we relegating pride to Chase Bank just on the corner? You see that like 12 times. Here, finally, I think we should be proud of what are supposed to be our city's hero. these heroes, which formerly had this, I think there is a time when you can and should have a beacon and say, hey, you know, FDNY, we're not embarrassed. And this is a place you can come, as you're asking me, how do you know you can come? And at the same time, the signage is too big. And it feels like a large signage. Okay. Yeah, Ron.
I'm sorry, can I just interject? First of all, renderings don't tell the true story, and the Station 39 could have a perforated panel to mitigate it. We didn't want a vertical that was thin up there for wind loads and things like that, so having it be something that the air goes through. So I think that you're seeing it more prominent than it would be. I also think that we've left on other projects that we've done. We did the Apple Store, we left Station A on it when it was a post office. I think that it's important to say what it is. That other building really looked like a maintenance garage. It didn't look like a place of public service. So.
No, I certainly agree with the previous, but the way it looks now, but I just at least respectfully question the height, the material, and the size of it. And also in terms of the buildings on either side, which I think one should respect, because they are, especially on this side, they are in a way representative buildings and architecture in East New York over a long period of time. It is a community that I know, but it's one since I've lived there.
We can raise our window line, the bottom sill, to be more in line with the neighboring building. Right there, we could bring that whole thing up.
Well, I certainly would respect my colleagues' views on that as well. I'm certainly looking for a change, and that might be one. But the height, prominence, material, I think at least needs to be respected, needs to be examined again.
You know, what I'm hearing, you're articulating that it's okay to go up because there are different heights in the other buildings, but the other buildings are solid masses with clear tops. And this is not what you've got. It sort of reminds me of a Western town.
Spaghetti Western, you said?
Wait, I'm from the West.
Yeah. And I should also let you know Ronette's father was a fire chief, her brother's a fire captain, her nephew's a fireman, so there's a lot of fire.
There's lots of ways to identify the building without doing that.
There are a lot of other ways to identify the building. And it is true there is an aesthetic decision being made, and it is a decision about materiality and confidence, and does speak to everything from Silver Cup Studios, which is the company that's come over to Queensboro, you see, to the Coca-Cola sign, which you see. But this idea of drive and broadcast is a big part of Brooklyn. We want to do it in one material, it's just red steel, without obnoxious illumination, passive, punched metal. But yet we do want to do it.
I'm sort of confused in terms of design choices that are being made in aesthetic and just in the practical sense of the building. And if this is more of sort of an office type of building, I'm not sure why it needs to be covered up so much. I mean, there's room for, because it's more an administrative building, for it to be more open and more convenient to the public.
We do agree with and appreciate transparency in some organizations, and we do, if you're talking about glass, the amount of glass and fenestration, it sounds like you're getting that.
It could be glass, it could be a different choice instead of such an abrupt, like metal to brick, flat surface, almost, I mean, dare I say, prison-like situation. I mean, it looks like it doesn't look inviting. It looks like you're standing off to the public.
It's a fortress.
Yes,
I mean,
that's what it was.
so safety, so we're balancing two things, right? Which is when we all learn to be the values in urban design and civic leadership and transparency at the same time, the inhabitants of the building and the FDNY has issues of security and the reality of the context and location. So how do you make something that's safe and secure?
Can you explain that a little bit?
In other words, there are, to have a full ceiling to floor fenestration and glass is not something that's a reality right now, right here, and doesn't meet the client's needs.
Is there a history of vandalism?
There is a history of, well, maybe urban.
Yes. We have had many complaints from the members using the building to our OSHA unit about health and safety and safety on the job. I don't know.
People attacking them?
Yes, there were actually people who walked into the building. I don't remember exactly when that was, but it was this year in 2016, where there were people uninvited going in and out or trying to go in and out of the rooms. We store narcotics in here. So as Esteban had described, we never deploy ambulance from the stations. They go out into their individual spots like bumblebees in the field, and they wait for a call. That's why we have that pedestal project, so that they wait and they don't have to idle their engines. So, but they do come back to the station to restock Band-Aids, nebulizer masks, as well as narcotics. So we do have a storage of narcotics here, and this is a documented fact. You can go on the NYPD website and you will see that this is actually the neighborhood. The precinct for this neighborhood is the one that handles the highest volume of felonies of all 5 boroughs. There have been times where the building has had shots fired at it, whether it was intentional or it was just because they happened to be there and the gun was pointing that way. I don't know those details, but I do know that this area is very concerning for the members who use the building.
And do you feel like having more windows or just more transparency in the building is going to keep people from walking in it?
I don't know if, I'm not quite sure if I understand correctly what you're asking.
I guess, I'm not sure if Rick is what's going to protect.
Irma didn't want any windows.
No, I would appreciate a few windows, but no, to your question, you're questioning if having more brick, a more solid facade would deter people from walking in. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the people who are coming to look for narcotics specifically.
I'm not sure what would be going because I'm not the type of person who would do that, so I'm not quite sure how to answer that. All I know is that when we have 94 people working out of this station, just as I or you or anybody else, they want to feel safe in their place of business. It's my job as the fire department's architect and the consultant's job to make sure that their workplace is going to be secure. And I don't want to design a bunker. That's far from it. I mean, I've sat here many times with you where the consultants present different designs for C2 and so forth. So I'm open to a level of design excellence. But for this particular location, maybe we can have that with less, I guess, less transparency. Because I wouldn't want the members using the building to be in danger because somebody's been scoping the place out through the windows casually walking by to get at the narcotics.
Isn't that what the interior architecture walls sort of, would that serve that purpose? Like if there's a side wall that covers a certain sort of facade where people still feel like, oh, I know what that is, you know, but not.
We're not suggesting a window display of narcotics.
Why not?
So I think the issue is that it's fine, but this is definitely a building that would need to be redesigned very soon at this state. And I think the question is, how do you make something that's beautiful? And it tends to be that people respect beautiful buildings.
Well, yes.
And if you have one in your community, more people are going to feel appreciative or respected. And I think that's what's been exciting about the new approaches to designing the firehouses. And I think that all we're suggesting is that in this case, the most beautiful thing on the building is the sign. And I think that's scary because it's just like, I'm glad it's Station 39, but I don't think it gives me any information as to why it's being redesigned, because it's not, it's not that much prettier. If you just fixed up the current facade, renovated, it might just look as good.
Let me, if I can just chime in and give you a little bit of the background so you are aware. First proposal, was all glass, all glass to the left. And it was brick on the right. And then we had the offset. And there was immediately, of course, a concern about security because it wouldn't comfort for the people entering the human program. So we had a lofted double height entrance on all glass. I think it might be, and I am familiar with your work actually, so I'm just talking a little bit about what the impetus might be and what I think you're leaning towards. And then the other opposite swing was no glass, fortress, right? So we've come to be like, how do we make something that actually is inspirational, positive, without it being all glass and without it being transparent? The original design, the reason these signs were this tall is because this was a rapid lift door. It went straight up. It had vertical fenestration that matched the pattern. It allowed the sign to be seen through the glaze. For maintenance and operations issues, we're considering rollback doors. We need you, it's what they're familiar with, what will last. So we're looking into the rollback door. Nonetheless, we don't want to kill the heartbeat of the project. The red pole, the red signs as you're talking about. It is now the project, otherwise it's a brick wall with a ribbon window. There's also budgetary constraints for why we're not doing double height all glass spaces and atrium to the left. But if you have a specific vision of how this exact, other than chopping off the signs, which is kind of what I'm here to resist doing, otherwise it ends up being a brick wall. Working within this framework and understanding that we've gone through a history of negotiation again here, I'm trying to see what...
Could you go back to the original facade? And I know you said you tried it, but thought about it. But I just think just some element of design can also reference transparency. I think some of them are concrete bunkers, but they just have really small windows. It's not about just having windows, it's just having something that feels that there are some elements that do kind of relate to the other buildings, and it's hopefully not a lot of work. But I think the feeling that we've all had is that this is definitely something that gets the job done, but I don't think it's a portfolio piece for anyone, especially looking at the work that you all have done. And I think it being placed in East New York obviously has socioeconomic suggestions about why certain neighborhoods get amazing buildings and why some don't. And I think we would just make even the smallest attempts. And as a great friend of mine said that beauty is a basic service. And I think that's something that has been happening over and over in our city that everyone's appreciated. And I think we're just suggesting that is something that kind of is put into here. And it's not because I don't think the signage looks good. It's just I would love for other parts of the building to kind of at least complement the signage rather than have good signage put on top of like boring building. Definitely will be renovated in 20 years because it will look outdated.
I mean, to be honest, and there's the other project for the Chargers that, I mean, to me, that seems like almost completely what Hank is saying, which is like certain neighborhoods get the beautiful designs, and then other neighborhoods get the so not beautiful designs. And I think that that's an overarching problem if this is the way that DNY is going to negotiate the funding of their services or the architecture in different neighborhoods. I think that's problematic. That's all I'm going to say.
The fire department is in no way, shape, or form trying to express that certain neighborhoods get a different, more favorable design than others. And in no way does the fire department want to build something that is a bunker or not inviting in neighborhoods that do have certain problems. This is a building that has a facade length of about 50, 60 feet. It's a one-story building that's been a garage since 1930. And this station has only had band-aid repairs since the past 30 years that it's been an EMS station. We can further look at the facade and try to develop something different, but I do not want the committee to have this impression that the fire department is not putting in 100% of our design, our own design excellence in certain neighborhoods because of the way those neighborhoods happen to be.
You don't believe that's the case if you say that's the suggestion of this building?
I see.
and to make it, if that's the thing that I think is if there's some elements to make people who look at it feel like, okay, they renovated it and I feel like happy. Maybe I'll protect it to be more.
I think the proportion of the signs is not correct. I mean, that's why it looks a bit like a false front. I think they're too tall, which is not to say that they need to come all the way down, but that band, I also don't understand. Can you go back to the closed door? I really don't understand the windows, the horizontal.
When the windows are fully horizontal in a row, which we have many iterations, it is a super oppressive strike through flat line. And it is very conscious.
I'm talking about the windows on the door.
That's so the garage door can roll.
We inserted this volume due to the fact that it's not a rolling door, so you have to have the plans, so you have to have.
But what are they actually? Do they have to look like windows?
Which ones are you talking about, these?
Yeah.
I don't think I understand the questions.
I find that to look really weird. It's very disconcerting.
We have, actually, maybe there's a miscommunication.
Yeah.
But we actually changed the noise to look like this, thinking that was the PDC request, because previously we had this fenestration rhythm continue through here, so the idea was just bump, 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 but the windows looked alike. However, if you don't do a vertical door, you need to have panels, right? So it has to bend in the ceiling. When it's vertical lift, you don't, so it's a solid, continuous, one window element.
What's the height of the windows on the door?
These are 2-foot bands, so 2, 4, 6, 8. So 10 and 12.
They're 4 feet.
Oh, this is a total 4-foot measurement, and this is a total 4-foot measurement. And this total door height is this height.
Yeah, I do very much agree with Hank and Mary. I'm not setting up that somehow that you are setting deliberately a discrimination because of this in terms of this community, although you have made it very clear that you view security here because of the neighborhood of paramount importance. Even if you are correct, there seems to me to be a number of ways to address it and to do better design. First, if I may say, unless I misunderstood you, you started by saying, well, we were originally all glass or something. I don't think anybody here or elsewhere would be saying you should do an all glass building. That's setting up a straw man or a glass. That really has nothing to do with it. Secondly, even now as I looked at the photograph of the previous building, which yes was run down and clearly not maintained, but there was interest in the facade. There was the curve and the materials were more interesting and more in a context of the buildings on either side than this sort of very flat institutional fortress-like use of the building. So I'm only, and I very much hear my colleagues too, just trying to struggle with you that the signs is all too high and not of aesthetic quality, and also I just don't know what the goal is. There are other ways to show the pride and the identity of the station than this rather overwhelming height and so on.
The existing building has no windows.
I'm sorry?
The existing building has
I know.
no windows.
I know you said that, but we're now looking at it a little differently. So these are just, and I have one last question. You'll tell me immediately if it's not relevant. In the other boroughs and other neighborhoods where there is EMS, and then the ambulances that you go out, they are at the pedestal if you're able to do that. What has the design, or if there's been an opportunity to rehab or change it, what have the examples been like for other buildings where inside there may be narcotics and lots of people may be interested? I mean, I don't quite get how it works Because there are other places all over the city where these facilities are.
Yes.
And now where there might be quite different design and one that may address some of our concerns.
Well, of course, every building is different because they're all.
Right, but you said security, I mean, security always counts, but there may be other options.
The other buildings that we recently completed, EMS 39 is also in Brooklyn, it's in Williamsburg. It's a two-story building. The upper floor has basically red transparency, but the lower floor, the street level, is all red metal.
Okay, like to see that.
Yes, so there we had the opportunity to include transparency on the upper floor because the upper floor, all we had were locker rooms and storage spaces, and it was on the upper floor to begin with, and it's in a neighborhood that has less crime. But even though the crime rate may be different, the ground floor is all solid metal panel, street level. Here we have only one story, so we have to marry the transparency with also the security at the street level.
So, Mabel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just to go back to what you were saying about the signs and the sculptural elements. I think on the right side, the fact that there's really just identifying, functionally identifying information, it really turns it into a sign. It's very hard to get away from it just being a sign. And I think what other people have said is that, I think it feels aggressive a little bit. The other thing too is that if this is punch cut out of metal, you're going to have to stencil this in some way too, so that it will change this, this type of design. Or kind of like some Mars Vico or the A, so the counterparts that artists are promoting will be like stripped, which also that kind of has this militaristic connotation as well. So I would really rethink if this is really like a sculptural element, like does all the work that you're saying that you want it to do. I think the FDNY to me, I don't mind the FDNY sign. I think that does actually announce the kind of heroic aspects of everything you're saying. I think, but I don't think anyone knows who Station is at all. People know who the FDNY is, but
there has been.
So I wonder if one, the second structure, one has to be the sign, and two, it has to be that large.
So, I'm assuming you're a graphic designer.
Yeah.
I was before I was so there's been talk about supporting some of the OPAs. First off, there were other words before, whether it was EMS 39 or emergency medical was larger, so there has been finessing on what this graphic display is. The manifestation of punched letters on the facade, we do not want it to be militant, but at the same time, if you see a Rhodey band case, the standard stencil, we do understand that that can be also desirable. And it's not always related to the military, it's often just related to industry, and it is an industrial sign. As far as aggression goes, personally, I don't think of it as aggressive, I think of it as confident. Sometimes the two are confused, and I also don't think, sometimes aggression and confidence can be misconstrued, and I don't think aggression in its pure form, if it's not against anything, I think aggression of self-exertion is not necessarily a bad thing. So that's my personal opinion.
What's that other signage? I know one is a graphic. What does that say?
The fire department, city of, and it has the rhodopacephalis, which is the double snakes around the same way. And that is the standard signage on, required.
Well, I think just to conclude, you've done a valiant effort to defend your design, but I think that in my reading of the opinion of the majority of the commissioners, certainly all who have spoken, we are asking you to rethink the garage door.
So, just to be clear also, it's not so much defending the design, but I'm actually very impressed. There's this pushing for what I would have considered a DEC, Department of Design Construction Design Excellence project, when this was 2 just a patch initially, just patch to make sure there's no leaks, and actually we have advanced it and pulled it out of it. Let's just, fix the cracks, let's do something better, more positively new. And you're pushing even further, which is great, but I'm surprised because I didn't realize that there was the budget for this at this station, or that was the objective, to make this design excellence benchmark that's not through the DVC. We're happy to do so if that's what this is calling for.
Well, I think we certainly support that this is a design excellence project. And we think that this neighborhood deserves design excellence like every other neighborhood does. I think we're saying that aesthetically, the majority of us around the table find, in particular, the emphasis on Station 39 to not be a public contribution. We all want to know that it's an FDNY facility. We appreciate that there is a certain concern about security. We certainly don't want folks who work here to feel in any way threatened or uneasy. But I think that there needs, what might be very helpful when you come back is to show us some other EMS stations and see how those accommodate similar issues of, narcotics and vehicles and workers. But I think that the balancing of those two sort of faux facades when you're trying to register the sort of we used it heartbeat, but the articulation of elevations is a worthwhile effort. But we're asking you please to rethink how the signage works, what message it's conveying, why it's there. Is there another way to advance design excellence without necessarily doing it in extremely large signage?
There are many different ways.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time and the opportunity, and thank you guys. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
the commission for approval. And then since that time, we actually put together a prototypical set of guidelines for the design of the greenway that sort of go through the components. And you'll see those slides later on in the presentation and talk about the prototype. And then we'll get into the specifics of how they apply to Alset. So just getting into the neighborhoods that the greenway runs through, you have Sunset Park and Red Hook for the area that we're going to focus on specifically. Then you have the different capital project segments. And again, this is capital project segment 23. This is Alset, so this connects into Alset Park, and then the shorefront greenway that runs along adjacent to the Belt Parkway. This is the specific project limits for the Alset connector. So it goes from Alset Park along Wakeman Place, then up 2nd Avenue from Wakeman Place to 58th Street, and then we'll continue on in the future. But this is the segment that we're focusing on for this particular capital stretch. Here are some existing conditions photos, just to give you a sense of what's out there. So you can see this is the existing Alset Park greenway path that connects into the waterfront esplanade. This is Wakeman Place. This is a pretty constrained portion of the site. You have the Belt Parkway, Shore Road, sort of entrance and exit ramp along this slide, a fairly steep slope with a lot of mature trees, fairly narrow sidewalk, and then this section is primarily residential. Just looking again along Wakeman Place, you can see sort of the narrow sidewalk, residential buildings on the side, and you'll see this is one of the areas where we're pretty constrained in terms of what we can do with the greenway. It's actually a shared use path here as opposed to a completely separated greenway for bikes and place for and path for pedestrians. Now we start to make the turn. So this is 2nd Avenue here. This is Wakeman Place going back down. Here's that entrance and exit ramp that we talked about before. You can sort of see how that landscape slope continues on in the existing mature vegetation. This is looking up 2nd Avenue. On 2nd Avenue for a good chunk between Wakeman Place and 63rd Street, there is a bridge, a viaduct, that allows tracks to go underneath it to the Brooklyn Army Terminal, which is over here. So this is another constraint that we had to deal with in terms of the plan, and we'll see how that results in the design. Then this is looking along the Brooklyn Army Terminal between 64th and 65th, and 63rd and 64th. Here we have a wider sidewalk. There's a little bit more flexibility in terms of what we're able to do in applying the greenway design. Again, just some existing conditions as you move along. It's a fairly consistent treatment in this section. Again, a different character here too, more manufacturing at Brooklyn Army Terminal, different uses along this part of 2nd Ave. And then this is the northern portion of the site, up towards 58th Street. Yeah. So now we'll get into the greenway design itself. So this is part of the prototypical guidelines that we had submitted to the commission earlier this year. Basically, we talked about breaking it up into the different zones for the greenway. So you have your sidewalk zone, essentially where the people, the pedestrians will be walking. We have a buffer zone that will separate the pedestrians from the cyclists where possible. And these zones will vary in width depending on how much space we have. Then you have the greenway, the bike path where the cyclists are, and then where we can get at a street buffer that will also provide a vegetated buffer from the cars to the cyclists. So these are the zones. This is sort of the prototypical application. And then as we get further into the presentation, we'll see specifically what we're doing on Alset. So again, you can see how it breaks down. We have a maintenance partner, the Brooklyn Greenway Initiative, for the entire stretch, which is really great. It's been a great partnership. And there's also an Adopt a Greenway program that was developed in concert, in part for this. So we have a slew of maintenance partners that allow us to do some non-standard treatments, which is really good. So in terms of the sidewalk zone, this again gets into the various widths that we're talking about. This is going to be the typical standard sidewalk, 5x5 concrete. In the sidewalk buffer, this is where we're going to look to get trees, wherever we can. It's not possible in all of those locations, but this is the goal for here. Also looking at permeable pavement, plantings if it makes sense. This is where you'll have the wayfinding, the bike racks throughout the corridor. Then the greenway itself. So this is your typical sort of recommendations in terms of width. And again, these dimensions will shift and shrink or expand as applicable. The greenway or the bike path piece is pretty set. 8 feet is generally as low as we'll want to go. 7 we can get away with in very short segments. That gives a 4-foot path in each direction. The sidewalk buffer and the street buffer, those are the things that will shrink and either go away altogether or change depending on the amount of space we have in any particular right-of-way. And then again, the street buffer, this is just to provide an additional layer of protection from the cars to the actual built-up anyway. So this is now actually getting into the Alside piece. Along Waking Place, again, we are constrained here, so unlike the guidelines that you just saw, this is one instance where we have a shared use path where peds and bikes are all together on the sidewalk here. Again, this was a very constrained site because of the existing slope towards Shore Road. We had very limited ability to expand that sidewalk, or otherwise we would have had to take out all of the existing mature trees there, which is something we didn't want to do. Again, those trees provided a very significant buffer, both visually, just functionally to the highway that's there. They're very mature, so they have a lot of benefits. We were able to carve out some space where you see the tan here, where there's no existing trees in that space, so we do provide a little bit of a pull-off, a place for future seating, a place for somebody who, if they need to, they can get off the path because there's a shared use there. Then this just gets into the specific material layouts. Again, it's a concrete bikeway here, it's a shared use path.
But how do you control a shared use path?
So, I mean, it's people and bikes are allowed to be on it.
No, I understand that, but I mean, we all know the reality of
Sure.
bikes are pedestrians.
So, in this instance, one of the other things that we felt was compelling for this particular location is there is no adjacent use. Right? There are no buildings along that stretch, you just have the landscape slope. And it only leads you to Alside Park, it leads you to that greenway. So if you go back just very quickly to the map, actually I can go back to the pictures, sorry. So again, there is no adjacent use here, so we're not really worried about people stopping to go into buildings or people needing to traverse this particular sidewalk unless they're on the greenway. They're going to essentially expect to be on that type of space. And then along with the markings and the signage that we'll be incorporating, you'll have sort of similar signage that you see along the greenways across the city. So it will be signed. I mean, again, there are certainly conflicts, we recognize that, but in this case, this was one of the important connections to get you to that Alside Park and onto the rest of the waterfront esplanade. And we feel there's just no other way to do it in terms of the space constraints that we have. So then just moving on. So this gives you a sense, again, of all the existing trees that are there. There are more on this side that aren't just rendered. The section just will give you a sense of the actual dimensions. This is where you have 4.5 feet for each direction of movement, and then you get to the slope, and then in spaces where we have that pull-off, you get an extra 5.5 feet space for people to get off that path to either, if their bike gets a busted tire, they have a place to actually pull off the path, or if somebody just wants to rest, there is that extra space where we can put it.
Are there incremental, like, how often does that happen?
So we tried to do it wherever we could with the existing vegetation that was there. Again, you can see this is a longer one than this one because of the way the trees are configured around it. Again, I don't know why the drawing doesn't show the existing trees on that side, but there are existing mature trees along that whole slope. And it is a fairly short stretch in terms of its overall length in part of the greenway.
How long is it?
It essentially runs from Colonial to 2nd Ave, so it's 4 blocks, I think, is the total stretch. Something along those lines? Yeah. We can certainly get you that specific number. But yeah, they're pretty standard size blocks. And here's just a quick rendering of what it would look like. So again, one of the other things that we're doing is this will be a concrete path as opposed to the asphalt path that you'll see on the separated greenway. So just give a little bit more focus to the pedestrians and the fact that there are many people on this path and not just bikes. So in addition to the signage and the markings, we are looking at the material piece as well to just make it clear that this is not just a place for cyclists. Then we get into 2nd Avenue. So between Wakeman and 63rd, we do have that viaduct. So in this case, the complications in terms of actually rebuilding that bridge, we're just going to have a painted path here. So it'll still be a two-way path, but it will be at the roadbed level, and then you'll have a curb and you'll have sidewalk in the section that's white. And again, it's, in order to rebuild that, you essentially have to rebuild most of the bridge to change the geometry that's on that structure. And there's just a lot of complicating factors with the rail that goes under there. So we wanted to be able to implement this project, and this was the direction we had to go for this particular stretch. Then, as you get from 63rd north to 58th, this is where it takes on the more prototypical greenway. So you'll have your buffer, your greenway, you'll have a sidewalk buffer, and then the sidewalk. And this is how it goes, leading you up to 58th Street. Here's the material layout. There are some places where we're able to the path will jog just in terms of this being a top of the neck down, so we're looking at some pedestrian improvements there as well. This is just a quick example of the layout plan. So we'll have trees that buffer between the sidewalk and the bike path, and then we have a street side buffer that's about 3 feet wide that will have a mix of understory ground cover plantings. Again, the goal is to keep things low maintenance. We don't want things that are too ornamental or too fussy, but we do want that green buffer wherever we can get it. This is the various street sections. So you can see from Wakeman to 65th, this is where the bike lane is on the roadway. Then from 65th to 63rd, sorry, I got 65th and 63rd mixed up earlier, is where it goes onto the sidewalk. You have your buffers. This will give you all the dimensions. From 63rd to 60th, the dimensions do shift a little bit just because of the various constraints. And then as you get up to 60th and 59th, we do get squished and lose the trees in that particular section. And then finally from 59th to 58th, it continues. So this gives you a sense of what it looks like on that viaduct. So this is where the greenway is at roadway level, and then this is where the greenway is up at sidewalk level. These are the sort of proposed plantings that we're looking at. Again, stuff that you see quite a lot in the city at various places, and tree pits and other things. Pretty simple mix, trying to keep still some variety in texture and color to bring that together. And that's the presentation. So again, this is the first segment of many. There's a couple segments that are in design actively. There are segments that have been built out operationally just in paint. So this is going to be quite a long-term process in terms of building out this whole stretch.
I'm chairing this session since Sydney is accused, and I wanted to commend you for the proposal. I actually thought it was a overall thoughtful adaptation of the prototype, given the constraints of this particular site and the highway infrastructure that we need to deal with, in addition to the adjacency to the residences. So I thought that was well done. I just had a couple of questions. The on-street segment on 2nd Avenue from the Bell Parkway on right to 65th Street, it looks like you have to put the greenway on the roadbed, and there's a painted buffer, and I thought it might be useful there. I think there's a rendering of it. It might be useful there to put some kind of, there are those kind of standard plastic bollards, something to just give the drivers the indication that there is a greenway, since for the experience of the cyclists, it will be a continuous aspect, but for the drivers as they're navigating these various road topologies, it would be great for them to know that they should slow down here, that there is an awareness, especially since it's not going to be raised to curb level or curb grade. So that was just something I thought of. And then just, there is research that shows that people tend to walk closer to buildings on roads where, so I wasn't as concerned about the narrowness of the shared path. There's a sidewalk adjacent to the buildings, and I think in general tend to hug building lines versus a fence line, especially when the fence is bordering the highway. So I thought that was actually well done. Do people have other commissioners have other comments? Okay, yeah, well, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to put that consent, so I think so.
Yes.
The public meeting is now commencing with the consent agenda. We have items number 25870, 25873, and 25882 to 25905. Please note the conditions of approval as recommended by the various committees, as well as the recusals. The recusals are Commissioner Aaron's recusal from items 25873 and 25882, Commissioner Shepherd's recusal from item 25870, and my recusal from item 25898. Are there any other recusals that are not noted? No, let the record show there are no other recusals. For the record, there are members of the public present, but neither of whom has signed up to testify. Is that a correct statement? Thank you. Will someone make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Please raise your right hand if you're in favor. Okay, we appear to have a unanimous approval on the consent agenda as laid forward. Now we will move on to the public hearing on 25906. And per our normal practices, we will allow the presenter their time, then hear members of the public, and then we can continue.
face, I should say old friendly face. We've been doing this for 30 some odd years. Hi, my name is Robert Bookman from Gazetsky and Bookman. This is my associate Max Bookman. Good morning. Yes. Proud dad, yes. Max joined the practice about a year ago. I've been representing newsstands this fall, so it'll be 30 years since Iowa City government helped form the New York City Newsstand Operators Association, and I've been working with your agency almost as long as that. It's been a long time since we've been before you because things have worked out very well in the last number of years, and where all of the applications that we're involved with has gone on the consent agenda, which so I haven't had the pleasure to spar with any of you folks for many years, and it's been wonderful. And I understand this matter was on the consent agenda last month as well, and it was put over. So we're a little rusty at presenting. Please forgive us, especially since the architect who did the design plan, James Garrison, who I've also worked with for 20 some odd years now, ever since the Art Commission gave him a design award for newsstands, when back before there was coordinated street furniture, we worked with you folks in improving the old wood ones. He's had both hips and both knees replaced, and this morning he just said, I guess the weather, it's too much pain, couldn't make it. So Max actually understands how this stuff works, so we'll just run through it and make our presentation and answer any questions you have, and respond to whatever reasons why it's not on the consent agenda.
Well, we will have some public testimony, so we won't speak until after this.
Great.
Okay, good morning, my name is Max Bookman, and let's go through the presentation. So this nose newsstand is your prototypical pre-approved design, the standard Samusa design. Of course, the company that now manufactures the stand was Deco. They took over Samusa. Location is the northeast corner of East 47th Street and Madison Avenue. And as you can see, we're on the streets of the side street. We're not on Main Avenue, so there's no impact on any of the visual corridors running up and down Madison Avenue. We're on the 47th Street side. Here's our closer view of it. It's opposite the standard office building. The entrance actually to one of the northern quarter entrances to Grand Central. There's stairs going down right here with the office building. It's a modern, large office building, steel structure. It'll complement the prototypical design very nicely. Yeah, here's the pictures of it. It's not blocking the plaza. This would be the first stand on the corner. If we go back to the larger diagram, there's no other newsstands on any of the corners. I know that's a matter of concern for this commission. Now, I see the presentation is 4 by 10. Our submission, this must be a mistake, our submission was for 4 by 12.
At some point. This application has been literally sitting around for 6 or 7 years. There's been a number of CDs that we gave to you guys. The last one, we believe, was 4 by 12. It was originally approved by DOT for 5 by 12. Then, according to your guidelines, 4 by 10. DOT approved that as well. And then we were at an impasse for a couple of years, and we asked for a compromise at 4 by 12. 12 feet being, going down to the 4 feet pursuant to your guidelines for that width of sidewalk, but keeping the 12-foot length, which was extremely important to our client from a business perspective. And that 4 by 12, before the coordinated street furniture, was a readily approved dimension by then Art Commission and the Public Design Commission. It is one of the standard Samusa contractual combinations, and for years when we were before you with 5 by 12s and 6 by 12s, you would often ask for a 4 by 12 because, as a compromise, because it had a, terminology folks use, a narrower impact on the street, something like that. I'm sorry, I'm aware of it. But a cleaner sight line or something like that, I think, is what was used. So 4 by 12 is pretty standard stuff in the real world out there, so that's what we were hoping for.
Yeah. And I would hope, again, this was on the consent agenda. I hope response. Thank you.
All right, with it, we have one person who would like to speak, Mark Wurzel.
I had signed it as well.
Oh, sorry, I only had Max and Robert Bookman.
Oh, I'm sorry, can I sign it?
Please.
All right.
So,
they had it.
so, Mr. Wurzel?
I was going to defer.
Oh, all right, then
I'll go first.
Francis.
Bergold. Sorry, my handwriting isn't spectacular. So, my name is Frank Bergold. I'm from Cozen O'Connor, here on behalf of JP Morgan Chase, owner of the building at 270 Park Avenue. I'm here in opposition to the installation of a newsstand at the northeast corner of East 47th Street and Madison Avenue, because the proposal is procedurally flawed in violation of the placement requirements and aesthetically inappropriate. A newsstand at this same location was proposed twice before and failed in both 2009 and 2013. We understand that this proposal was not presented to the community board at all. You should not consider the application until they have done so. Under DCA's newsstand siding clearance requirements, the minimum clearance from sidewalk obstructions for subway entrances is 15 feet. The proposed location is directly in front of the Grand Central subway and train station entrance at 270 Park Avenue. It does not appear to meet the standards. 270 Park is the global headquarters of JP Morgan Chase. This was actually written last week, but this corner, in light of the tragic events, this corner is a sensitive security location and a frequent frozen zone during visits by dignitaries, such as when the UN is in session, but also periodically when officials meet with the bank and are in the area. When the NYPD established a security perimeter, all receptacles, trash cans, food carts, anything else that could potentially hold an explosive device is removed. Pre-positioning a supply of shrapnel at this location presents a significant risk not reflected in the design. This is among the busiest corners on Madison Avenue. The Grand Central entrance generates thousands of commuters during peak hours, which can barely hold up on the sidewalk as it is. Public safety will be compromised by the proposed large obstruction in the event of an evacuation through that entrance. The Commission should take into account the generic newsstand design that is not appropriate at this specific location, just as you do for application historic and other special districts. Given the security concern at this location as well as the potential impacts of such construction to the appearance of 270 Park Avenue, the well-known Union Carbide building. While we believe that no structure here can satisfy the 15-foot rule at a minimum, the size should be dramatically reduced, the transparency increased, and the use of the metal eliminated to the maximum extent. The application is design deficient and procedurally flawed, and thus we respectfully request that the Commission reject it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else you would like to testify?
Yes.
So, you are Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Mark Borzell, and I serve as General Counsel for Grand Central Partnership, and I'm an officer of the Grand Central District Management Association. I appear before you to offer some comments on the application to install a newsstand at the northeast corner of East 47th Street and Madison Avenue, adjacent to the northwest entrance to Grand Central Terminal and the world headquarters of JP Morgan Chase at 270 Park Avenue. For purposes of disclosure, a representative of both the MTA and JP Morgan Chase serve on the board of directors of Grand Central Partnership and the Grand Central DMA, and Max Bookman serves as an intern in our office.
And I'm friendly with all of them.
For the past 3 decades, the partnership and the DMA has been dedicated to enhancing the quality of life in the Grand Central community. With the support of this commission, the partnership and the DMA have devoted significant resources to upgrade the streetscape elements in our community and rid our sidewalks of clutter and obstructions that impede the free flow of pedestrians, particularly in and out of major transportation hubs. Unfortunately, the proposed newsstand site runs counter to these efforts and seemingly rejects the city's own sidewalk clearance requirements. The proposed site is located footsteps from a highly utilized north entrance to Grand Central Terminal. For the past decade, the north terminal entrances have alleviated overcrowding in the terminal by providing commuters a convenient alternative to access Metro North trains and platforms. The entrances are already serviced by an active group of newspaper hawkers during peak rush hour periods. Installing a permanent obstruction at this highly trafficked entrance to the terminal clearly compromises the safety of pedestrians and commuters. Given the events of the past 72 hours, I think everyone can agree on the importance to keep entrances and exits to public transportation facilities free of any permanent obstructions that would impede the flow of pedestrians, particularly in the event of evacuation. Furthermore, this location is adjacent to the recently rezoned Vanderbilt Avenue corridor, and is also part of the area within the proposed Midtown East rezoning plan. Since these rezoning proposals are almost certain to spur the development of new higher density office towers
20 seconds. 20 more seconds.
in the immediate vicinity of this site, challenges pedestrian and commuter congestion at these locations are going to grow. So accordingly, Grand Central Partnership and the Grand Central District Management Association believes that sound and rational planning principles would dictate that this application be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a matter of information, we have received the community board report.
Okay.
So we do have that.
Just one more factual, I want to correct. This application there weren't two different applications over the years, this location. It's been this applicant and her brother, they're an immigrant family. They have one newsstand, they've been trying to get a second one for their family. It's been us all this time. It's gone back and forth. It was never actually rejected in 2009 or 2013. It's been one series of issue after another. And the security issue specifically is what held this up for years, because there was some question that bollards weren't going to go into this location. So after DOT did their review, did their pedestrian count, did all the measurements, we were held up for, what, 2-3 years on the bollard issue until DOT finally determined that there was no bollard application. As we can see in 2016, you were there this morning, it's not there, it's not part of it. So, it's been my clients who have been trying for years now to make this part of their American dream and have a second newsstand in the family, with, and continue to operate sidewalk newsstands. I did not hear anything, quite frankly, from the two people who spoke, which really fall into Public Design Commission areas, your sweet spot of, the look of the building, etc. All has to do with DOT issues, which, as you well know, have been long resolved prior to it coming to you. So all these concerns have been dealt with by DOT, have been passed by DOT. The only one that they haven't, because it's a new one from my friend Mark, is there's a lot of rezoning going on in the city. Well, yeah, there sure is, and there always has been. And that's not a requirement for approval of a newsstand, that there might be some future rezoning and new building going on. If that was the case, there'd be no newsstands, because New York is always reinventing itself. There's always new newsstands, there's always new buildings going up. And we work well with those new construction. Sometimes they build a little wall around an existing newsstand, or under the new law, sometimes newsstands are removed from construction, sometimes for multiple years, until construction is done, then they come back. So none of those are really problems, and none of those are design issues. And we would ask that you would focus on the real design issues and not this extraneous stuff that's already been resolved by other city agents.
Just for clarification, the letter from Committee Board 5 is dated 2013. So the Committee Board has not looked at this again since 2013.
That's correct.
Am I correct?
You are
That's its original state. At the same time, I may have missed this, but when you talked about the dimensions, I think you said that you had changed the dimensions more recently. Bergman, if there was a change, if it was substantive, did it go back to the committee board? Is this a different, is it slightly, or more than slightly different than the original application in 2013, which you admittedly say has been delayed over the years, and your assertion is for extraneous reasons? I just want to know, is the application the same, or what's the change in the dimensions that you just referenced?
Sure, thank you. It's actually a smaller footprint than what went to the community board originally. This footprint that went to the community board originally was a 5 by 12. We were requesting a 4 by 12. So when you, so it's not only within the same footprint, but it's a smaller footprint. Historically, Consumer Affairs has not required us to go back to the community board when we're not shifting one place or the other, and we're asking for less space than we went to the community board with, and less space than DOT approved.
So there's no other
Correct.
change that you made in the
None.
last year's except?
That's correct. And DOT actually approved a 5 by 12 as far as clearances and all that. We're only asking for a compromise of a 4 by 12.
So I just want to clarify, the application we received and we're reviewing is 4 by 10. So if the commission is comfortable with it, we can approve a 4 by 10 today. We cannot approve a 4 by 12. That would need to be resubmitted.
Well, okay.
Yes, that was just what I was going to say. When you go back to the plan that shows the dimensions and the clearances, so we will, I think just for the benefit of the people who testified, Mr. Bookman is correct.
I just want you to show that there's a DOT approved plan from 2014 for 5 by 12.
Right.
We've often, when we appeared before you, compromised and reduced that footprint. We obviously have to get you a final plan, but we've not had to come back another time when we try to work with you and agree to a smaller footprint, when DOT has already approved a larger footprint.
But what's the application before us? We just
No, I don't know why you have a 4
We
by
see
10.
4 by 10.
I don't know why you have a 4 by 10 because it's a 5 by 12 that was approved by DOT.
This is the application where we...
Yeah, I mean, I know the numbers, I don't know, yeah, I mean, I don't know what CDs you were sent. I know that there is a 4 by 10 approved by DOT signed off, and it's a 5 by 12.
Okay, but we can only consider the 4 by 10 because that's what was submitted.
You don't
If
have,
you'd like to withdraw it and resubmit a different size, it's your,
well, I would like to hear what you have to say, as far as approving the lease list before you, because if you're not going to approve a 4 by 10, you're certainly not going to approve a 5 by 12, and there's no sense in us spending more money and more client time doing that. So, yeah, I think in fairness, given how long it's taken us to get here, I'd at least like to see what your vote is on the 4 by 10. Maybe at the end of the day, the client will even accept that.
Well, you are correct, Mr. Bookman, that a number of the issues that were raised are not in our purview with regard to clearances or security or whether it's a frozen zone on certain occasions. We have to rely on DOT to advise whether that proximity to the Metro North entrance is too close, whether this is adequate clearance, and it meets with their clearance requirements. There is the newsstand is a contemporary design. It comports with the building, and we would not modify the newsstand aesthetically. We approved it as a module for every location, including historic neighborhoods. So I would say that I haven't heard anything or seen anything that personally gives me pause as to why this shouldn't be approved at 4 by 10. Should you choose to upgrade, we can discuss.
Right.
But I'd be interested if other people have other opinions.
I just want us to be clear as to that it's 4 by 10, and that it's, you just said several different things, so if it's 4 by 10, and that's the application before us. That's what we are acting on, and not your assertion.
I agree, I agree.
So, are there any other points of view here? So we're going to vote on this, and our vote is to approve. We need 6 people in favor. So can I have a motion to approve? Second? All in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, it is unanimously approved with 4 by 10.
Thank you.
Thank you.